Alright, now let's get on to installing the motor. Now this will hopefully be easier than the rest of the chassis has been so far, since all there is mounting the motor onto its block and adjusting the gear mesh. Never know what's going to happen though. Let's just hope for the best. So this is the motor mounting block. Just a simple angled wedge of metal. Pretty clean. I'll just file a little bit here and there. Make sure it sits flat. Let's see, it'll mount in this area. And actually they didn't even begin to drill the hole for it, so there you go. Arbour Models doing their thing. So there's also this pin that mounts in another hole. So they did at least give markers right here, so that's a little bit helpful. Now, I can at least start by putting this onto the motor. So this uses these two screws here. These are metric screws instead of the usual 256 and such, since it's a Japanese-made open-frame motor. Some Arbour Models kits actually include a can motor made by nickel plate products, but I think it's more common to find these that have an open frame motor. That's actually not lining up too well. I'm going to have to expand those holes. Okay, I've got a drill bit that's just slightly larger than the hole diameter. So I'll drill them out a little bit. Now let's try again. Okay, that feels like it's going in better. Okay, it looks like the screw isn't poking through far enough to touch the armature, so that's good. Looking at that though, the screw head is sticking out from the bottom of the motor mount. But I don't want the screw to go in any further, so what I might do is once I've done a little more work here, I'll either drill a hole beneath it to give it clearance, or I might just file down the screw head. Putting a hole there might be the better option though, so I think I'll do that. Just a shallow one, it doesn't have to be anything deep. So now I need to drill out these two holes. Okay, I think the drill bit I used before will be the right size. And I kind of wish I had a drill press for this, but I'll just have to make do with what I've got. And this hole down here is where the screw head will fit, as long as I get things lined up correctly. So I'll just carefully drill that out. Keep it as straight as I can. And that was a pretty good shot. Drilled almost completely straight, so the screw fits in there just fine. Now I just need to drill this other hole part way. Doesn't have to be all the way through though. Almost forgot, I also need to drill out that hole and tap it for a 256 screw. So I took that back off from the motor for just a moment. Try and drill that straight. Okay, got the hole drilled. I'll just put a little oil on my tap there. And get the threads cut into that hole. Okay, now this part's ready to use. And the last thing I wanted to do was just put a larger hole here. So I'm just gonna do that a bit. see how that works. Okay, let's see how things fit together. Pin fits right in there. Okay. And the screw goes down here. Should tighten in without any problems. Okay, so now the motor's on there. I think that mesh might be a little too tight though. Okay, so I think I'm actually going to put a small spacer back on the front of that block. Don't want to put any strain on a small motor like this. I think this little piece of phosphor bronze will do the trick. Just a touch of super glue right here. There's really not much room there to add a shim. I hope that works. It still feels like it's riding on there a little. I'll have to shim the motor a little more. While making that adjustment, I realized I could just put the shim between the motor and its block. So maybe that'll work now. I put a thicker piece of metal in there. Yeah, that feels a lot better. There's still good mesh in there, but it's not so tight that it's going to cause binding. So let's power that on up. Should get contact from the right rail, and then I'm sure there'll be some way to connect to the top there. I'll just hold that in place for now. Okay, maybe I got the mesh a little looser than I thought. Or maybe the wheel's just moving up and down, so I'll have to shim the plate below it. Okay. But it is working. That's a good sign. Okay, I've made some small adjustments and glued some shims in place made from phosphor bronze. Let's see how that works. All right, now let's see what happens. Might have gotten things a little too tight. Yep, just got the back a little too tight. Okay, so I'll just make a few more small adjustments there and that should get it right. Also, that's a really fast motor. In fact, I wonder if that's actually a 6-volt motor, because that is way faster than I see from other motors this size at 12 volts. And that there is 6 volts. Okay, with a little more fine tuning, I think I finally got it. It's working pretty smooth now. And that is the 12-volt speed. Motor also has very little torque, so I think I'm going to do a magnet upgrade on this one. See if that helps. Before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and attach the wire they provided to the motor, which I think I'm just going to have to solder that. And this actually looks like it might be made from the same metal as the rest of the kit, instead of them just using a regular brass or any other solderable material like anyone else would have done. So I'm going to have to be careful not to melt that. I'm going to start by putting some solder on the top of this motor screw. Got to be quick to make sure I don't cause any damage. Okay, that wasn't playing too well with the motor, so I just took the brush holder out. I'll solder the wire to it and screw it back into the motor. Okay, let's see what I can do here. Oh. You know what? There's no point in using that piece that they provided. Honestly, I don't even know what they were thinking. They don't describe in the manual how to actually connect the wire to the motor. I'll just solder that onto there. Just turning it back in like this. I had to make sure the brush and spring didn't fall out first. There, that seems to be tightened all the way on there. And then this will run back to the tender. So now, hook that up to the frame and I can connect this here. And now it works. Okay, let's see about putting a stronger magnet in this motor. So I think this will be an easy change out because it's only held in place with this one screw in back. And I have this stack of neodymium magnets to put in there. So let's start by taking that screw out. And slide out the old magnet. And before putting the new one in, find out what the correct pole is. Okay, looks like I've got it in the correct direction. Yeah, that way pushes away, so this is the way I want it. Does it fit? I sure hope so. And that bent out just slightly. It actually just came out from the brass holder a little. Okay, now that's in there. I won't be able to put the screw back through, so once I'm sure this is aligned and running correctly, I'll just use some super glue on the top and bottom to hold things in place. Yeah, not quite. That actually changed the alignment of the worm slightly, moving those plates around, so I'm going to have to add another thin shim in there to correct that. Well, I've got the motor off. Might as well give it a little test. That actually seems to be working real well. So since that seems to be aligned correctly, I'm just putting a little super glue in a couple areas, like between some of the plates, between some of the magnets and the motor plates. Spread that around a little. That'll keep things from coming apart or losing alignment. And then I'll just wipe off a little bit of the excess. May not look that great, but it'll work. Let's see how that is now. I think that's a lot better. Current draw is lower too. And it feels like it's got a lot more torque. I barely had to put any pressure on the wheel at all to stop the motor before. So this will be much better. All right, so just for quick reference, here's the speed with the old magnet. And here's the maximum speed now. There's definitely a difference there. So now that that's done, I'm just going to add in some fresh oil and call this step of the assembly done. I am happy to see that this is at least turning out to be a decent runner, from what I can tell. It's just taking a lot more work than what is normal to get to that point. Okay, now a little grease for the gear. Get the motor started, and I'll let this run in slowly. So I'll just get rid of some of that excess. Definitely makes things quieter having the grease on metal gears. Change that around, make sure things are working well in both directions. Okay, that's looking good. Now, unlike the Bowser kit, I'm not going to assemble the tender frame in this video for further test running just because that's going to take a lot more work. So I'm going to handle that in the next video I do, which will also show the assembly of the boiler and cab, and we'll get through all that.